Greetings. I'm Cathryn Bennett, fourth year PhD candidate in UNC Greensboro School of Education in the Higher Education Educational Studies program. This is a very short form presentation of my dissertation research about refugee women in higher education. To begin with, the definition of a refugee accounts for people who cannot return to their country of origin, owing to a well-founded fear of being persecuted for reasons of race, religion, nationality, membership of a particular social group, or political opinion. Importantly, refugees are forced to migrate. They don't move by choice. For the purpose of this very short presentation, which is about my dissertation, which was a critical qualitative multiple case study of refugee women and included 3 cases: refugee women, support workers, and also boundary spanners, or people who were originally resettled to the US as refugees, but then became workers in the field. However, I will only address one of 3 research questions. How do refugee women talk about higher education? The purpose of this work was to explore resettled women refugees' beliefs and access to higher education through processes and relationships, specifically in the place of the US South sociopolitical context. Additionally, this work seeks to disrupt the social injustice of refugee women's limited access to higher education in the United States. The impetus or larger global background for this work includes 79.5 million global refugees. However, this statistic does not account for forced migrations from Afghanistan and Ukraine. At the time of those 79.5 million refugees, 80% were women and children. And in 2019 in the US, the context for this research, 78,761 refugees were resettled. Pertinent to the field of education, 76 of global refugee youth are out of school. This means that they aren't attending K-12 education, largely due to the exigencies of forced migration. Furthermore, pertinent to the discipline in which I am earning a PhD, only 3% of global refugees are enrolled in higher education. Also, as a note, these data are not disaggregated by gender for post-secondary education. Some of the key literature that framed this work relates to education as a human right, or in other words, the inalienable idea that everyone should be able to access education. More specific to the United States, ONOGS did a study of US higher educational institutions and found that the response to refugees is disjointed. In other words, some institutions have no information specific to refugees on their web pages or in their admissions offices, while others have specific and purposeful programs designed for refugees. Furthermore, Hailu conducted a research in Colorado in the US with multiple generations of refugees. And what she found was that older refugees use the stories of their forced migrations, in other words, becoming refugees, to transnationally locate themselves. In other words, to express their identities and claim places and facets of self that are central to how they understand themselves. And they use those stories to advocate for younger generations to pursue education. Also specific to the United States, the Refugee Act is the immigration law that codifies the approach to refugees in the US. One particularly important feature of this law is called self-sufficiency, which requires that refugees be gainfully employed as soon as possible after resettlement. Also related to this idea, Koyama conducted an investigation specifically about self-sufficiency discourse and found that refugees in citizenship classes were subjectified when it came to work as either at risk or in need of somehow saving, or being risky from the perspective of potential employers assuming that they would take jobs from other people in the US. Resettlement workers are extremely influential in navigating, or rather helping refugees navigate these situations and pursue educational pathways. Methodologically, this is a multiple case study, and I included within case and cross case analysis. Within case refers to understanding what refugee women think about higher education, what resettlement workers think about refugee women's higher education, and then also the same for those boundary spanners, or people who were originally refugees and are now working in the field of resettlement support. Participants for this study, like I mentioned, included these three groups. There were 9 refugee women, 9 support workers, and 4 boundary spanners. This is an overview of the refugee women participants. You'll notice they each have a pseudonym and age range, languages in which they are fluent, educational background, and affiliation, either with a refugee resettlement nonprofit, which is not federally funded, or a VOLOG, which includes those agencies, resettlement agencies, that facilitate refugees' movement from a place of asylum or temporary location into the United States. You'll notice that the cases, the participants, Beatrice and Jamila, are in bold, and those are the 2 women whose anecdotes I will highlight for the purpose of this presentation. Beatrice was affiliated with a VOLOG, or resettlement agency, as she was in her first 3 months past resettlement at the time of the research. She stated, "When we came here, our case manager told us that for me, I can never go to school. When you come here for the first time in America, you have first to work when you're over 18. We have to look for money first to pay the loan, like the case manager told us. The loan refers to the money that the agency lent to Beatrice and her family to pay for airfare, and it's a debt that they have at the time of resettlement." Conversely, Jamila, who was primarily affiliated with a nonprofit, stated, "Education is key for my life. The baby, all those other girl kids. I will go back to my country and say, you guys say women can't go to school? Look at me. So now because of my school, I'm someone. For me, my parents, my baby, all those girl kids. With education, you can be somebody. You can take pride in yourself." To conclude, refugee women discussed educational attainment in terms of their transnational community uplift. In other words, their ability to connect with other people, not just in the place of resettlement, but all across the forced migration journey toward community uplift. They refer to education as a means to help themselves and help the people that they know and other refugees. This empowerment through higher education is a buffer against the hegemonic implementation of self-sufficiency as just a job. Relatedly, I have recommendations for higher education that include humanizing approaches and developing community and university partnerships. In short terms, I would love to see more colleges and universities facilitate access pathways and application information in multiple languages, so refugees can share this information and discuss it with their transnational communities. Related to community and university partnership, I highly recommend every campus become a refugee hosting one through Every Campus a Refuge, which began at Guilford College in North Carolina. This beautiful, cost-neutral, unique program works in collaboration between colleges and a local resettlement agency to ease the hardness, the trauma, and the tension of recently resettled refugees' lives. Significantly, this dissertation research disrupts the idea of economic self-sufficiency as only gainful employment. Conversely, participants conceptualize women refugees' education as vital for their lives and the betterment of their communities. Furthermore, findings from this research are consistent with other literature in the field of higher education that resettlement workers are central to refugees' experiences of self-sufficiency along a continuum of either essentialization, making them get a job, any job, or humanized approaches that facilitate refugee women's educational access to enhance their contributions to transnational community. Thank you so much.